This blueprint is developed by Hindraf for and on behalf of the poor and marginalized Indians. This blueprint lays out concrete proposals to resolving permanently, comprehensively, and practically the long-standing problem of the poverty and marginalization of Indians in the country, a problem that has plagued our country since its inception. The realization of the steps and measures laid out in this blueprint will begin to pave the way out of a shameful condition that our country finds itself in, and will lead to a new, modern, prosperous, just, and dignified Malaysia, a Malaysia that we all need. Now, what is unique about this blueprint is that it is a bottom-up effort. It lays out the historical antecedents to the problems of marginalization of the Indians. It clarifies the scale of the problem. It lays out solutions which are comprehensive, permanent, and practical. And it also spells out a method for the realization of the end results, taking into account the complex reality around us. This blueprint, though it is an economic document, is based on a patriotic desire to contributing to creating a country based on social justice as the foundation, and where every citizen will be equal in all aspects, will be conferred the dignity and respect of proud citizens. All of this will have the effect to the nation of bringing out the fullest potential of all its people. It is only where there exists true equality and fairness, and where every citizen is prized, will there emerge a nation of anak semua bangsa di bumi manusia. This brings out a very important question for us all to answer. Just what kind of a nation are we? Are we a nation where one ethnic group hegemonistically dominates the other ethnic groups based on the history and the geography? Or are we a nation based on the ground reality of a multi-ethnic and multicultural peoples? The way forward is always premised on the strength and potential of its peoples. The way forward for a nation. Experience shows this time and again. This is the concept of the nation we need. A nation based on the ground reality of the peoples of the country and its potentialities. To achieve this, we must be able to recognize the turns we have to make to move away from the past failures, so that we can learn and so that we can move on. The best for Malaysia is yet to be. One of the major failures of the past has been the policies of the ruling political and economic elite that has contributed to the marginalization of a significant section of our people, the Indian poor. Marginalization results in the community being pushed out of the mainstream of development and into the margins and edges and relegated to a second-class status. The result is they are denied significant life opportunities, cast aside socially, and left to cope with their extremely meager means. What made this situation more critical was that when the plantation Indian lost his job, he did not only lose his job, he lost everything. He lost his home, he lost his school, he lost his temple, he lost his burial ground, he lost his relatives, he lost his neighbors, he lost his opportunity for ancillary income, he lost his social system, he lost the community support, he lost everything. The result today is a problem we have. When you lose everything, you start from zero. The rest of the country had moved on, but the plantation Indian was reset to zero. The scale of what has happened is enormous, but it is hardly recognized. This has resulted in the problem becoming invisible, buried, and forgotten over time. We, on our part in Hindraf, are connecting the dots now, once more, and showing the severity and enormity of this problem. so that all of you who visit this document, this blueprint, will know that what we suggest in these pages are commensurate with the scale of the problem. It is so very easy to forget what has happened over the time that it has happened. And when we look for correction in a compressed span of time, it may have that effect. We are connecting the dots to show you clearly just how big this problem really is. Moral governments act in the interest of all their citizens. This is the social contract. Our Malaysian social contract is enshrined in the Federal Constitution. Article 8 of the Federal Constitution on equality provides for equality. But the Malaysian political and economic elite who form the Malaysian state and government have chosen to completely ignore this provision for equality of all citizens, resulting in their compromising the interests of the Indian plantation workers. This, in spite of the historical contributions the Indian plantation workers have made to put Malaysia into the modern economy. It will be unimaginable what Malaya or Malaysia would be without this historical contribution today. The Indian plantation workers were consciously excluded from all the development programs since independence, in full knowledge of the ensuing consequences. A total of 1.15 trillion ringgits was spent on socio-economic development of the country in the last 47 years. That is 150 billion ringgits spent on socio-economic development over the last 47 years. Yet, hardly anything significant was allocated for the development of the plantation Indians. Right through the 47 years, all the plantation Indians got were promises, exhortations, plans that never saw the light of day. By legislative enactments, by administrative measures, by political manipulations, by outright deceptions, by disenfranchisement from the democratic process, by fear, by disinformation, by suppression, the ruling elite reneged on its social contract to these people and committed a heinous crime of denying life opportunities to so many generations of them. Denial of life opportunities included denial of employment opportunities in government, denial of upward mobility opportunities, denial of educational opportunities from preschool all the way to tertiary levels, denial of rights of worship by the demolition of places of worship, and worst of all, the denial of rights to live at the hands of the Malaysian police. And as a result, or as an outcome, the marginalized Indian was created. The marginalized Indian was created by the socio-political system of this country, by the desires of the political elite, the elite of this country. This must not be accepted. Time has come for atonement and correction. The country has to wake up to this truth and stop trying to bury the problem under so many guises. In August of 2007, Hindraf presented its 18 points demand to the UMNO government. The 18-point demand is a comprehensive set of demands laying out measures to bring the Indian poor into the mainstream of national development and to eliminate issues of racism and religion and to set the nation forward, removing some of its shackles that is holding it back as a nation. In this blueprint, we have gone one step further. We have developed a practical set of proposals based on those 18 points, and on the basis of priority, we have identified 6 key areas that must be addressed within the next 5 years. These issues lie at the core of the Indian marginalization problem and also at the core of the problem of moral decadence in our government. The 6 key areas are: number 1, the impoverished state of the 800,000 former plantation workers. Number 2, the 350,000 Indian Malaysians who are stateless. Number 3, the denial of educational opportunities throughout the education system and the resultant stunting this has had on the community. Number 4, the systematic denial of employment and business opportunities to the Indian poor. Number 5, the corruption and impunity of the Royal Malaysian Police, and that results in serious human rights violations against the Indian poor. Number 6, the non-observance of universally accepted human rights laws and practices, resulting in a system of institutionalized racism. The first correction plan addresses the main problem relating to the internally displaced Indian estate workers. The proposal that we put forth in this blueprint will immediately address the problems of life opportunities, bringing out the huge productive potential of these people and putting their natural affinity to land to best use. This will in turn put to rest one critical problem of land that has surrounded these problems all these years. The proposal requires the setting up of an agency that will operate a land allocated contract farming program similar to the FELDA program for these displaced estate workers. The proposal calls for 20,000 Indian plantation worker households to be provided with necessary land to engage in various productive and necessary agricultural activities, covering around 200,000 acres over the next 5 years. There is abundant experience with this kind of economic venture for us to be confident that this will be a successful program. The second correction plan in relation to the displaced estate workers addresses the issue of housing. The proposal is to build on a subsidized basis quality and affordable homes for 100,000 displaced estate worker households. This is an entirely new phenomenon where we are proposing the forming of semi-urban and rural Indian Malaysian communities in such colonies, with all socio-cultural facilities provided for, such as places of worship, burial grounds, community centers, playgrounds, and other relevant amenities. This plan will address the issue of the breakdown of social cohesion within the Indian community, something which is very real and discernible in the trends of Indian youth behavior. This is not recognized as a significant phenomenon for it to be adequately addressed just yet. In the past, what housing programs there were for these people tended to eventually result in urban slums, further aggravating the problem. The housing program proposed here goes beyond providing the shelter of the house to these poor people. It helps to rebuild a social system that is on the verge of disruption due to the massive displacement that has occurred over these last 40 years. If you look around the country, you will see that Indian youth are largely employed as contract casual workers, security guards, lorry drivers, cleaners, factory workers, or are employed in jobs that require no skills, or are in jobs that are extremely hazardous that others do not want. This is the sorry state of the employment opportunities available to our Indian youth. When the plantation workers were pushed out, they obtained no support to re-equip themselves with new skills to cope in a new urban environment. Worse still, many of them were drawn into crime. Many of them are drawn into crime now, contributing to the growth of the underclass amongst the Indian youth. Our proposal here is to rebuild the Indian youth. And we need to do this by providing them with the skills that are needed in our economy, and to provide the retraining in ways that make it extremely easy for them to pick up the new skills. The whole retraining program has to be structured to appropriately address this peculiar circumstance of the Indian youth. Any pre-existing programs just will not fit. New programs will have to be designed to rebuild the Indian youth. There are 78 community colleges in the country, 176 Gyatmara centers, and what we need is a program designed for the Indian youth and an allotment of 10,000 places set aside every year in these institutions for the Indian youth. And to hasten the process of bringing them into the productive sector, making them productive, is to provide employment and small business opportunities. For this, the government should open up opportunities for employment and for small business for these Indian youth as they come out of their training. This is something again, which is new. This effort needs to be nurtured for it to be eventually successful, and adequate resources need to be applied. It is easy for us to try and force fit this program into what exists, and then to see it not work, and then to say that the Indian youth just will not make it. This is not what is required. What is needed is nurturing for it to be eventually successful. Today, large number of Hindu temples and burial grounds sit on former estate land that is targeted for other uses today. These structures have become illegal by virtue of them sitting on what is now private land. The solutions we propose here in relation to the land on which these temples and burial grounds sit is to provide state land to all such temples, shrines and burial grounds across the country. This is a social amenity that is required for any community. The community that we have is an impoverished community and cannot create for itself these amenities. The state has to step in. The state has absolved itself of all responsibilities in these areas up to now. In addition, all temple structures above 100 years old should be identified as heritage structures, and the state should provide appropriate protection for these, should identify them as heritage structures and should provide appropriate protection. The second major issue is that of the 350,000 Indian Malaysians who are stateless in the country. What we have here is not a technical problem, as the officials and politicians will have us believe. What we have is a political problem. All the affected people are born here, have lived here, and will probably die here, and whose parents and grandparents were likely born here and lived here all their lives. Our proposal for correction is very simple. Just simplify the procedure for the issuance of statehood to these people. The simplified procedure should call for no more than 2 Malaysians to make statutory declarations on the birth and parentage of these affected stateless peoples. This should adequately settle the problem once and for all. As we said, the problem is not a technical problem. The problem is a political problem. We hear of how easily some others acquire citizenship